Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. And Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Paramahansa Purudikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. ISKCON BBT founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Purudikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavindra ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 23rd day of September 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 2, entitled Contents of the Gita Summarized. Text 14, bottom of page 79. Matra sparshastra kaunteya Shitoshna sukadukadaha Agamapahino nityas Tang tatikshasva bharata. Matra sparshastra kaunteya Shitoshna sukadukadaha Agamapahino nityas Tang tatikshasva bharata. Matra sparshastra kaunteya Shitoshna sukadukadaha Agamapahino nityas Tang tatikshasva bharata. Go ahead, Prakash. Matra sparshastra kaunteya Shitoshna sukadukadaha Agamapahino nityas Tang tatikshasva bharata. Go ahead, Ed. Ed Kane. Matra sparshasta kunteya. Shitoshna sukadukadaha. Agama pahino nityas. Tang satikshasya bharata. Matra sparsha, sensory perception. 2 only. Kaunteya, O son of Kunti. Shita, winter. Ushna, summer. Sukha, happiness. Dukkha, and pain. Daha, giving. Agama, appearing. Apayhinaha, disappearing. Anityaha, non-permanent. Tan, all of them. Titikshasva, just try to tolerate. Bharata, O descendant of the Bharat dynasty. Translation. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O scion of Bharat, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Page 80. Purport. In the proper discharge of duty, one has to learn to tolerate non-permanent appearances and disappearances of happiness and distress. According to Vedic injunction, one has to take his bath early in the morning, even during the month of Magh, January, February. It is very cold at that time, but in spite of that, a man who abides by the religious principles does not hesitate to take his bath. Similarly, a woman does not hesitate to cook in the kitchen in the months of May and June, the hottest part of the summer season. One has to execute his duty in spite of climatic inconveniences. Similarly, to fight in the religious is the religious principle of the Kshatriyas, and although one has to fight with some friend or relative, one should not deviate from his prescribed duty. One has to follow the prescribed rules and regulations of religious principles in order to rise up to the platform of knowledge, because by knowledge and devotion only can one liberate himself from the clutches of Maya, illusion. The 2 different names of address given to Arjuna are also significant. To address him as Kaunteya signifies his great blood relations from his mother's side. His mother is named Kunti. And to address him as Bharata signifies his greatness from his father's side. From both sides he is supposed to have a great heritage. A great heritage brings responsibility in the matter of proper discharge of duties. Therefore, he cannot avoid fighting. Om Jnana Timurandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshurun Midatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara. So, this is also a very famous verse, and I think I pointed out yesterday why it's placed right after the previous verse. Previous verse is the classic verse giving us an intuitive understanding of why transmigration is true. Dehinosmin yata dehe keumaram yopanam jara. Dehina means what's in the body. You can easily remember that word because it has the word in it. Dehina. Asmin yata dehe. Just as the embodied soul is going through different ages, right? We're in Kaumara, little boy, Yovanam, youth, Jara, old age. Similarly, tata deha antara praptir. He attains another body after completely leaving this body. So one has to be dhira and not be bewildered by the process of transmigration of the soul, but to speak in this body, but from body to body. But even though that's the case, it's difficult to be dhira when the one leaving the body is your dear relative, someone who you have a great attachment for. Then even though you know the philosophy and you know that person hasn't really died. I remember when my father died, back in '87, I visited my mother at the time. I was living in Miami and I flew up, and I gave her this simple understanding that life is eternal, that the soul itself does not die, just changes. And it was such a, it was, even though she wasn't really schooled, she had been a subscriber to Back to Godhead magazine, which was good, and she would read the articles. But when I assured her of that was like a very soothing thing for her, to realize that my father was in another place, I didn't explain anything about the benefit of having somebody in the family who's a devotee, not that I'm a pure devotee, but the best thing we can do for our relatives, anybody who has an affection for us or attachment, is to become advanced in devotional service. Because that all goes into the mix at the time of death, where you're going and, you know. So, I mean, pure devotee like Prahlad, you know, he was worried about his father. You can imagine, his father tried in many ways to kill him, and yet he was still worried about his destination. Please, you know, Lishringadev, forgive him, said, what to speak of Hiranyakashipu, I forget how many, 10 generations before, 10 generations after will be delivered. And that really came in handy because he had, you know, he's a Daitya, I mean, it's a race of asuras, basically. But because Prahlad was so great, his descendants were all great devotees. Bali Maharaj was his grandson, I think. And he, although he was externally a demon, when it came right down to it, he surrendered to Vamanadev and he became a Mahajan. And even Banasura was also related, and he's not as famous. Banasura means the demon with many arms. He was given 1,000 arms by Shiva. And because he once accompanied him on a drum, you know, very nicely, so he gave him 1,000 arms so he could play many drums at the same time. So he became very proud of those arms, you know. And the story is that one of Krishna's grandsons, Aniruddha, Banasura's daughter, Usha, became attached to him. Even she never met him, but in a dream somehow, you know, she became. So Usha's girlfriend, Chitra, I think it's Chitralekha, she had some mystic power, and she said, she was drawing all the different handsome young men, you know, and she finally drew Aniruddha, and Usha blushed. Yeah, that was the one I was dreaming about. Said, okay, I'll go get him. So she went all the way to Dwarka on the airwaves, you know, mystic flying, and she brought him back, and then she plants him in the inner quarters, you know. I mean, it's supposed to be guarded in many ways, you know, and they're having this affair. And finally, Banasura finds out about it. He's shocked and he's angry, you know, and at great effort, he arrests Aniruddha. So naturally, all of the great heroes come from Dwarka to rescue him. Anyway, what happens is there's this big fight between Shiva and Krishna. Actually, the Shiva Dwar, the weapon of Shiva. It's a Dwar means a fever, actually. So he was a heat weapon, but Krishna had the Narayan Dwar, which is the cold weapon. And Prabhupada says the cold weapon ultimately conquers the heat weapon. So Shiva surrendered, and Banasura came forward with 1,000 arms. So Krishna didn't kill him; he just chopped off 996 arms, I think it was, and so he had 4 left. And with those 4 arms, he went and he got Aniruddha and Usha, and he put them on the chariot and said, "Yeah, you go to Dwarka, everything's fine," you know. So he didn't exactly become a devotee, but Krishna did not kill him because he's a descendant of Prahlad. So this is a great advantage of being related to a devotee. So matra sparshas. Now, even though we may know the philosophy that, you know, my loved one has gotten another body, still the pain is there, and so one has to tolerate that. That's what this verse is all about. If the next verse makes it very clear, if you want to attain liberation, if you're aspiring toward breaking out of the round of birth and death, then you have to come to the point of being undisturbed in all these dualities that come in material life. And it's interesting, matra sparshas, shita ushna sukha dukkha da. It's not just the dukkha you have to tolerate, well, that's what we think of toleration, but the sukha. Why do you have to tolerate the sukha? I'm perfectly happy to have the sukha is happiness. No, because this is material happiness. The allurements for material happiness are just as dangerous for you as the pains, the suffering. It's a world of duality. So to be able to rise above those dualities, that means you have to advance spiritually. Identify yourself as spirit and act in the realm of devotional service, accepting the duties. That's the Prabhupada's whole purport is about, is that the test comes when there's some impediment to your doing your duty in Krishna consciousness. And at that time, are you determined to work through the impediments and do as best you can? Or you just say, well, there's no way I can do my duty because I have a cold today or something, you know, whatever. You know, in other words, one has to be determined to fulfill the duties as best one possibly can. And then, you know, if there's really some problem, then you can't do it. But you're committed to that above material considerations. That's what this is all about. And Arjuna was just the opposite. He had given up his duty because of his emotional considerations, bodily relationships. And so this agama payano, I remember when I first read that, it means they come and they go. I said the biblical phrase, and this too shall pass, right? That's supposed to give you the same idea. Just tolerate. This is time, it will also pass, keep your eye on God, like that. It's the same idea. So, Tam Statik Shastra. I remember memorizing this verse back in 73, it's often one of the first verses, this and the previous verse. So I was working on my shlokas, and I was working at the press from the very beginning practically, But it was wintertime, it was cold, and the press building was a little distance from the temple building. And we had to walk to the temple building, it was freezing cold, So, Shita Uchandugada. I took shelter in this verse, and I got into the inside of the building, and everything was warm. All right, let's go on. Text 15. This and the previous verse go together. Yam hi navitayantyete. Yang hi navitayantyete. Purusham purusharshabha. Samaduksakham dhiram. Sormitat vaya kalpate. Here's that word dear again. O best among men, Arjuna, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation. Purport. Anyone who is steady in his determination for the advanced stage of spiritual realization and can equally tolerate the onslaughts of distress and happiness is certainly a person eligible for liberation. In the Varnashram institution, the fourth stage of life, namely the renounced order, sannyas, is a painstaking situation. But one who is serious about making his life perfect surely adopts the sannyas order of life in spite of all difficulties. The difficulties usually arise from having to sever family relationships to give up the connection of wife and children. But if anyone is able to tolerate such difficulties, surely his path to spiritual realization is complete. Similarly, in Arjuna's discharge of duties as a Kshatriya, he is advised to persevere, even if it is difficult to fight with his family members or similarly beloved persons. Lord Chaitanya took sannyas at the age of 24, and his dependents, young wife as well as old mother, had no one else to look after them. Yet for a higher cause he took sannyas and was steady in the discharge of higher duties. That is the way of achieving liberation from material bondage. And the fact was, even though, Lord Chaitanya did leave his dependent mother and wife, they were protected and taken care of wonderfully by so many of the other residents and of the devotees of Lord Chaitanya. But the faith has to be that, well, I'm going to devote my life to Krishna, and I'm confident he'll protect me, and I'm confident he'll protect them. Now sometimes it's a painstaking affair, especially for the wife and children. But usually it's when you're older. Lord Chaitanya took at 24, which is unusual. But in most cases, the prescription is after 25 years, the elder son will take care of the mother and so forth. So that's the idea. So, but here, this a very stern warning here that one has to come to the point where the dualities of this material world don't disturb you, and you can maintain your steadiness in devotional service. And that's why in Rupa Goswami's Upadeshamrita, Essential Instructions, he talks about those things that are favorable. How's it start? Utsahan nishtayad dharyat tat karma pavartanat. It's exactly pertinent to what the Prabhupada is talking about here. Because what do you have to tolerate for? Well, the tolerance has to be in context with you doing your duties. That's what the tolerance is all about. Otherwise, I'm going to give up my duty, and there's no way I can take a bath today. It's 0 degrees. I'm not going to. I remember the stories coming out of New Vrindavan from the 70s. You had to break the ice in the river, so you could dip, get the bucket in there and take your shower in the morning. These people were coming, and they were doing it. You have to take a bath, And the other side is the women cooking in the heat. So, what does he say? The enthusiasm, patience, and determination. In what context? Tat karma pravartana. In context with doing all the things that you're supposed to do and refraining from the things that you're supposed to refrain from. So they all go together. If you're not enthusiastic, then it becomes very dry. Then it becomes impersonal. The enthusiasm means that in spite of the fact that it's difficult, you maintain your enthusiasm and you're determined over time. The whole thing over time. That's why patience. Enthusiasm, patient, and determined. And that's true of anything you want to do materially also. I mean, you say, oh boy, I wish I could play the guitar like that guy. Yeah. Okay, and your parents buy you a guitar, and you strum along a little bit, but you just don't have the determination to really break through the period when you're just struggling to, do the basics and not making music at all, So that's where the guitarists come. They've persevered, they've become expert and everything, and they go even more and more, and after a while it becomes spontaneous and automatic. You're not struggling so much. Now that's there also in Krishna consciousness very much. What starts out as a duty. Remember, was it this morning or last night? I lose track. We're talking about Vaidhi Bhakti. Vaidhi means rules and regulations. I forget we talked. Yeah. So, but it's a central principle. The idea is that whatever you want to achieve, either materially or spiritually, this is the goal in life. I'm going to go from here to there, and you fix your mind on a goal. So there's a path to that goal. Just like we have a bhakti marga. It's a path, right? And along the path, there are various do's and there are various don'ts. And because we're conditioned and we're not spontaneously attracted to do all the right things, therefore there's some austerity and surrender involved. So I remember we had this phrase, you remember the old civil rights movement? I don't know if you were on any marches or something. But I used to go on, I was on several on my march in Washington. And they had this song, keep your eyes on the prize, right? and I forget what the next line was, but march on or something like that. And that's exactly like that. In anything you want to achieve, either materially or spiritually, there are challenges because anything valuable requires effort, and austerity and all of these things. So, Rupa Goswami very wisely says, and every one of these verses, only 11 of them, so they're all essential. They're all like really, weighty. So, Nishtayad Dharyat Tattakamavardhat. Nishtayad means the determination, and Dharyat is the patience. In other words, you're not going to do it perfectly, right away. But if you persevere, and if you have enthusiasm for the whole struggle, Krishna will help you from within. He'll give you the intelligence by which you can come to me. And that includes all the steps along the way. How you learn the japa, how you learn to chant the mantras, and you're accustomed to getting up early, how to keep clean, all the different things that are necessary to maintain the mode of goodness and really progress. It's a whole lifestyle. But so here in this 15th verse, he's saying that you can't vyatiyanti. What does it mean? Distressing. One has to come to the point where these things that are distressing in and of themselves, and normally heat and cold, etc. You have a certain reservoir of determination and that can't be touched. And the wonderful thing about it is that as you go along in devotional service, the things that were difficult, that were obstacles yet you had to overcome, then it becomes easier. And the things that were austerities become something that you want to do. I mean, I'll be honest with you, Tulsi Puja is not an austerity for me anymore. When I first did it, early in the morning, didn't know the words, like first couple of times, But, all right, everyone's doing it, this is what you have to do. But gradually you learn the significance of it. And, oh, wow, we're going around Tulsi and all my karma is being taken away, again and again. And just to read, you read about it and you learn from knowledge, then you get more enthusiasm. Why would one want to visit Vrindavan? You read about it, and how wonderful it is, and the blessings, and Krishna, and did all his pastimes there, you can visit. So that creates a desire. You go to Vrindavan, and it's austere, just the flight, and going there, trying to live there, but whether it's just a matter of duty, because it's the right thing to do, I should do it, or you come to more to spontaneously wanting to do it, that determination to persevere and to do it is a constant. And if you're able to do that, then you're eligible for liberation. Otherwise, if you're flinching at all of the, the pains, if you can tolerate the difficulties, then you'll be more likely to be able to tolerate the allurements. There's two sides, remember, to this tolerance. That's why it says sukha dukkha. Prabhupada said, well, what's this thing about tolerating the happiness? That's, because the material happiness is pulling you. That's as much of an allurement as to, avoid the pains. Both ways it's your own consideration, not the consideration of the Guru and of Krishna. So these verses are very practical and instructive. Okay, should we go on? Text 16. Nasato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataha, ubayorapi drishtontas, tvanayos tattvadarshibhihi. Those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent, the material body, there is no endurance, and of the eternal, the soul, there is no change. This they have concluded by studying the nature of both. Purport: there is no endurance of the changing body. That the body is changing every moment by the actions and reactions of the different cells is admitted by modern medical science, and that the growth and old age are taking place in the body. But the spirit soul exists permanently, remaining the same despite all changes of the body and the mind. That is the difference between matter and spirit. By nature, the body is ever changing, and the soul is eternal. This conclusion is established by all classes of seers of the truth, both impersonalist and personalist. In the Vishnu Purana 2.12.38, it is stated that Vishnu and his abodes all have self-illuminated spiritual existence. Jyotingshi Vishnur Bhuvanani Vishnu. The word existent and non-existent refer only to spirit and matter. That is the version of all seers of truth. This is the beginning of the instruction by the Lord to the living entities who are bewildered by the influence of ignorance. Removal of ignorance involves the re-establishment of the eternal relationship between the worshipper and the worshipable, and the consequent understanding of the difference between the part and parcel living entities and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One can understand the nature of the Supreme by thorough study of oneself, the difference between oneself and the Supreme being understood as the relationship between the part and the whole. In the Vedanta Sutras, as well as in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Supreme has been accepted as the origin of all emanations. Such emanations are experienced by superior and inferior natural sequences. The living entities belong to the superior nature, as it will be revealed in the 7th chapter. Although there is no difference between the energy and the energetic is accepted as the supreme, and the energy or nature is accepted as the subordinate. The living entities, therefore, are always subordinate to the Supreme Lord, as in the case of the master and the servant, or the teacher and the taught. Such clear knowledge is impossible to understand under the spell of ignorance, and to drive away such ignorance, the Lord teaches the Bhagavad Gita for the enlightenment of all living entities for all time. So, here's another memorable verse. Now, this can be a little bit confusing because right up front here, it says that the body is unreal. Right? That's in the translation. Those who see the truth have concluded that of the non-existent, the material body. Does your body exist, Suresh? You don't think so? Well, I can't see through you, so you must be something. The idea that the material body is non-existent means that it doesn't have the kind of existence that the soul has. It's real, but it's temporary. And in this context, that temporariness is said to be non-existent. But you have to be careful, because the Mayavadis have that famous phrase, right? Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. Means that Brahma, spirit, is real. Brahma Satyam is true. And the Jagat, this material world, is false. But we don't agree with that. It's temporary. Why is it real? Because it emanates from the real. In other words, it's all Krishna's energy. So how can it be unreal? You know, the energy is as real as the... But it's fleeting. In other words, it's constantly changing. Sometimes it's manifest, sometimes it's not. The material energy, the Mahatattva, some of you have read, how the creation takes place. Eventually it all merges back into Mahavishnu. Nothing is manifest. So whatever happened to all of this variety and everything, it's gone. But it doesn't cease to exist. It simply is not manifest in the same way as it is now, with all the varieties and everything. The primordial earth, primordial water, or air, they continue to exist. But the varieties, which are integral to the activities of the living entities, the conditioned souls in the material world, that is coming and going. That's ephemeral. So that temporariness is the difference between sat and asat. This is a very important pair of words. The sat is a real. Sat, Chit, Ananda. Eternal existence. Asat means it's coming and going. So we as souls are sat, but our body is asat. It's changing. And the whole problem is that we've forgotten our sat or eternal nature, and we're identifying with this temporary nature. And because we're inherently eternal and full of knowledge and full of bliss, we're trying to achieve that nature in this temporary world, and that's frustrating. There's no permanent happiness, there's no eternal existence, and there's certainly no unlimited knowledge. We're in an ocean of ignorance here. So regaining that nature, awareness of that nature is what Krishna consciousness is all about. The real Satchidananda, or it is Krishna. Ishvara Parama Krishna, Satchidananda Vigraha. His form is eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss, unlike ours. Our form is made of matter. So the whole thing is that we're imitating. We're trying to be Krishna-like, and that is our fatal flaw. And because of that desire, we've been given this whole situation, the false ego, the false sense of self, and from that comes this whole material body, gross and subtle. And we've been going through various, gross and subtle bodies since time immemorial, trying to have what's impossible, the control and the enjoyment that Krishna has. And it's a waking up from that bad dream is what Krishna consciousness is all about. Uttishta Jagrata Prapavarana Bodhata. Jagrata means waking up. So we wake up to Krishna and Krishna consciousness, and it's like, whoa, this long sojourn, leading this false existence of trying to imitate Krishna has finally come to an end. So being trained in that way, that's what Krishna consciousness is all about. So this is a really nice verse. What is sat and what is asat? Nasato vidyate bhava. For the asat, there is no ultimate bhava or endurance. And there is no non-endurance. Na bhavo vidyate sata. For the eternal, there is no changing quality of bhava. It's kind of a festival of double negatives, but it's pretty clear what he's saying here. So the problem is that we're always absorbed in the asat, and it's incompatible. We ourselves are sat, eternal, and we're being whipped around by all this changing material energy. So rising above all of these changes, that's what this is all about. Because those changes produce suffering, or they may produce some fleeting pleasure, But all of that is just a distraction from our coming to the point of living on the Sat platform. And that means serving the eternal, the ultimate Sat, Krishna. Trying to be spiritual without Krishna is hopeless. What is that verse? Yen ye vindaksha vimuktamaninas tvayasta bhavad navishuddha buddhiya aruha kuchena parang padang tata patantyadho anadrida yushmarangaya. This is a prayer Prabhupada would often quote in opposition to the Mayavadis, uttered by the Devas when Krishna is still in the womb. They come secretly, to the chamber, and they offer these beautiful prayers. This is the most famous one. So they're glorifying the devotees. Then they say, there are others who are not your devotees, Ye anye adaminda, or lotus-eyed one, who are vimukta manina. They're liberated only in their own mind. They think they're liberated. Why? Because by great austerity, you can imagine how difficult it is to rise above the allurements of this world without Krishna, without the name, without the prasadam, without the devotees, without the deities to fix your mind on. Just by force of will, stop the mind, That's why it says, kritrena. The very word sounds like difficult austerities, doesn't it? Kritrena. Oh, okay. Now, ruha, I've risen up to parampadam. I'm now in the Brahman realm, Param Brahma, But there's no activities, no senses, no mind, Stop the mind, by force. So the aruha kritrena param padam patanchadho, they fall down again. And Prabhupada say, what do? Well, they get wrapped up in this material world. And sometimes they'll start hospitals or do some welfare work, But you've already rejected it as unreal, Jagan Mitya, remember? So now why are you coming back? Because there's no bliss up there. There's no bliss, just understanding I am that I am. And it's the bliss of when the pain stops. Like I hurt my hand a little bit, So after, I said, oh boy, oh, ouch, And then I washed it off, put a little ointment on there. The pain stopped. Oh, great. Now imagine if all your suffering stopped. That would be blissful for a while. But, not absence of pain is not real pleasure. That's just coming to the neutral point. So they come down again, and patanjado anadru, because they're averse to serving your lotus feet. That's the until you have positive engagement in relation to the Supreme Sat, the Supreme Eternal Person with all those varieties, the soul can never be situated happily. Is always, because he hasn't returned really to his original state. So that's what this is all about. Nasato Vijate Bhava. Okay, moving along. All these are like old favorites. I remember memorizing this chapter one time. Text 17. Avinashi tatadvidhi yena sarvamidam tatam vinasham abhijasyasya nakaschit kartamarhati. That which pervades the entire body you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul. So there's a lot of verses here talking about how the soul cannot be killed or cut up because he's on a battlefield. He's trying to convince Arjuna to fight. So this is one of them. Purport: this verse more clearly explains the real nature of the soul, which is spread all over the body. Anyone can understand what is spread all over the body. It is consciousness. Everyone is conscious of the pains and pleasures of the body in part or as a whole. This spreading of consciousness is limited within one's own body. The pains and pleasures of one body are unknown to another. Therefore, each and every body is the embodiment of an individual soul, and the symptom of the soul's presence is perceived as individual consciousness. This soul is described as 1/10,000th part of the upper portion of the hair point in size. The Shvetashvatara Upanishad 5.9 confirms this. I'll say, you say. Balagra shatabhagasya shatada kalpitasya cha bhago jiva savigyeya sachanantyaya kalpite. When the upper point of a hair is divided into 100 parts, and again each of such parts is further divided into 100 parts, each such part is the measurement of the dimension of the spirit soul. Similarly, the same version is stated. Ke shagra shatabhagasya shatangsha sadrishatmakaha jiva sukshma swarupo yam sankyatito hichitkanaha. There are innumerable particles of spiritual atoms which are measured as 1/10,000th of the upper portion of the hair. Therefore, the individual particle of the spirit soul is a spiritual atom smaller than the material atoms, and such atoms are innumerable. This very small spiritual spark is the basic principle of the material body, and the influence of such a spiritual spark is spread all over the body as the influence of the active principle of some medicine spreads throughout the body. This current of the spirit soul is felt all over the body as consciousness, and that is the proof of the presence of the soul. Any layman can understand that the material body minus consciousness is a dead body, and this consciousness cannot be revived in the body by any means of material administration. Therefore, consciousness is not due to any amount of material combination, but to the spirit soul. In the Mundaka Upanishad 319, the measurement of the atomic spirit soul is further explained. Esho niratma chetasa veditavyo yasmin prana panchada sambivesha pranaishchittam sarvamotam prajanam yasmin vishuddhe vibhavat yesha atma. The soul is atomic in size and can be perceived by perfect intelligence. This atomic soul is floating in the 5 kinds of air: prana, apana, dhyana, samana, and udana. It is situated within the heart and spreads its influence all over the body of the embodied living entities. When the soul is purified from the contamination of the 5 kinds of material air, its spiritual influence is exhibited. The Hatha Yoga system is meant for controlling the 5 kinds of air, encircling the pure soul by different kinds of sitting postures, not for any material profit, but for liberation of the minute soul from the entanglement of the material atmosphere. So the constitution of the atomic soul is admitted in all Vedic literatures, and it is actually felt in the practical experience of any sane man. Only the insane man can think of this atomic soul as all-pervading Vishnu Tattva. The influence of the atomic soul can be spread all over a particular body. According to the Mundaka Upanishad, this atomic soul is situated in the heart of every living entity, and because the measurement of the atomic soul is beyond the power of appreciation of the material scientists, some of them assert foolishly that there is no soul. The individual atomic soul is definitely there in the heart, along with the super soul, and thus all the energies of the bodily movement are emanating from this part of the body. The corpuscles, which carry the oxygen from the lungs, gather energy from the soul. When the soul passes away from this position, the activity of the blood, generating fusion, ceases. Medical science accepts the importance of the red corpuscles, but it cannot ascertain that the source of the energy is the soul. Medical science, however, does admit that the heart is the seat of all energies of the body. Such atomic particles of the spirit soul, of the spirit whole, are compared to the sunshine molecules. In the sunshine there are innumerable radiant molecules. Similarly, the fragmental parts of the Supreme Lord are atomic sparks of the rays of the Supreme Lord, called by the name Prabha, or superior energy. So whether one follows Vedic knowledge or modern science, one cannot deny the existence of the spirit soul in the body. And the science of the soul is explicitly described in the Bhagavad Gita by the personality of Godhead himself. So this is some of the ways in which the soul pervades the body and influences everything there. And you can actually experience it. You know, there's a whole thing, I think, but not in this purport, but, you know, why is it that, you know, you can cut your fingernails and your hair and there's no pain? There's no blood circulating there. Wherever there's blood circulating, then there'll be some sensation. That's why if you clip a little too close, ow! Because you got the part where there's like a little pink, right? So this is obviously true. And what's really amazing is how, you know, even in the whale body, the redwood body, you know, a tree, you know, huge bodies, the same principle is there. The soul is there, and it's somehow circulating, and, you know, the sensations. So it's the soul is very powerful when you think of like Brahma and all these great personalities, you know, live for millions of years and have such incredible powers. We really are using very, very small percentage, you know, in the conditioned state, human state. We're very kind of beaten down, you know. But we have that, in one sense, there's a certain advantage to that, because the great demigods, you know, they're devotees, and they have a great duty to perform, taking care of the water, the weather, and Brahma, the creation, and everything, you know. But it's you can imagine what you'd feel like is, well, yeah, I'm going to live 311 trillion years, you know. My body is what pervades this huge body, pervades this whole universe. And it's hard to be humble in that situation. We just look at Indra, you know, practically his whole personality is like losing it. Right, losing his perspective, You know, he's famous for that. You know, having sex with the wrong person. You know, and getting cursed and, oh no, what have I done? But then he surrenders. You know, in the end he always surrenders, so he doesn't get obliterated. But the point is, he's not on the same level as the great devotees in the line of Lord Chaitanya. Because the advantage is to being in, like, you know, when you realize how fragile you are and helpless you are, to that you can call out to Krishna from the bottom of your heart. You know, I'm just a particle of, you know, atom that's fallen into this sea of misery. Just pick me up, place me up. Rather than, I'm pretty strong. You know, I can do so many things myself. You know? So the great devotees, you'll see that they always express that. Their songs and in their verses, you know, how they're helpless. And they have a low estimation of themselves. Genuinely. Amazing. You read so you see Krishna's Kaviraj describing, you know, I'm worse than Jagai Madai, you know, like that. Because you know, that what that does is that awakens this sense of helplessness, and you see completely relying on Krishna. That's the thing. The demigods, you know, they have so many powers, and they're quite in that position. So this is the advantage of Kali Yuga. You know, we say, oh, this is not a very good yuga for, you know, yoga. It's a bad yuga for yoga, right? Because you're always disturbed, we don't live very long, we're misguided, there's all the disturbances, there's all this anxiety, COVID-19, and how are you going to practice yoga in this situation? You're not. You're not going to practice Ashtanga yoga. But you can more easily practice Bhakti yoga, you know? Forget about going alone, sitting in a cave somewhere. Let's all get together and we'll lift each other up and chant Hare Krishna, right? And suddenly you know, the devotees, the great devotees of Lord Chaitanya, they all completely surpass all these yogis. You know, get so absorbed in the siddhis and the powers. You know, as soon as you get those powers, you think, oh, that's my powers. You know, what happened to your bhakti? What happened to your humility? You see what I'm saying? But the devotees, they're not after these powers. You know, they may be given powers, you know, and use them in Krishna's service, but that's not their purpose. So it's a great advantage once we realize how helpless we are, provided that we take shelter of Krishna, the Supreme Powerful One, and realize our actual nature and our position, which is humble servants. How many stories do we find in the Bhagavatam of great yogis brought low? You know, Vasa is famous, you know, and Vishwamitra, and so many, you know, and all these demons that Krishna killed, they're all great yogis. They're all powerful yogis. That they have these cities. You know, Aghasura is not born as a big snake, you know, and raised as a snake. He's a great yogi. He said, well, that'll probably be a good for him, you know. I mean, they're kind of dumb. I'm reading Krishna book and come across this chapter, Dhenukasura, and it's typical. He's one, the donkey demon, right? He's the biggest donkey. Baba calls him an ass. So he's the most powerful. Balaram comes in and kills him easily, throws him into the top of the tree, right? And he knocks down a bunch of trees. So then the other asses, who are after all, they're yogis, you know. It's not that they're dumb, supposedly, but they've gotten into their role so much that they come to try to, you know, avenge their friend. They all get killed. Rather than slink off, you know, saying, all right, well, obviously we're not going to beat this guy, so let's get out of here. When it finally comes to the wrestlers, they get wise after a few of them are killed, and they all run away, you know. But the point is, these are all great yogis. They've got these powers, you know, of shape changing and everything like that, and Putana can fly in the sky, you know. But what good did it do with them? It just puffed them up into thinking, oh, we're powerful, we can kill this little boy, you know. So the devotees, you know, padam yad vipadam tesham, you know, you call out the Krishna helplessness, and that is the safest place to be, is to feel completely reliant on Krishna, just like a child being, you know, led along, you know, completely dependent. Okay, one more. Andabandhi me deha nityasyokta sharirinaha anashino prameyasya tasmadyujyasva bharata. The material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity is sure to come to an end. Therefore fight, O descendant of Bharat. Purport. the material body is perishable by nature. It may perish immediately, or it may do so after 100 years. It is a question of time only. There is no chance of maintaining it indefinitely. But the spirit soul is so minute that it cannot even be seen by an enemy, to say nothing of being killed. As mentioned in the previous verse, it is so small that no one can have any idea how to measure its dimension. So from both viewpoints, there is no cause of lamentation, because the living entity, as he is, cannot be killed, nor can the material body be saved for any length of time or permanently protected. The minute particle of the whole spirit acquires this material body according to his work, and therefore observance of religious principles should be utilized. In the Vedanta Sutras, the living entity is qualified as light, because he is part and parcel of the supreme light. As sunlight maintains the entire universe, so the light of the soul maintains this material body. As soon as the spirit soul is out of this material body, the body begins to decompose. Therefore, it is the spirit soul which maintains this body. The body itself is unimportant. Arjuna was advised to fight and not sacrifice the cause of religion for material bodily considerations. So the Bhagavad Gita unfolds in different dimensions or different perspectives of instruction. And here, the emphasis is, don't worry about the body. The body's going to die sooner or later, so fight this battle. See yourself as spirit. But the fact is that outside of this, very intense and concentrated environment of a battle, an imminent battle, the human body is a very important tool that we have. It's a great gift. And so, yes, it's temporary, and it can be destroyed at any moment. But while we have it, while we have our senses and our mind and everything like that, we have a great opportunity to use them for the elevation of the soul. It's the old example that Narada Muni gives and the Prabhupada gives, getting rid of a thorn with another thorn. I remember when I was a kid, I tell this story, but some of you knew. I grew up in an apartment with wooden floors. I don't know if they make wooden floors anymore. I guess they do in expensive places. So this was it was an apartment built in the 50s and 40s, and so I run around as a kid on the floor, and I would get splinters. I get a splinter. So I learned quick enough that my mother she would do some sewing. In those days, everybody did that. Not with a machine, but by hand. So she had a set of a little box that had the thread in there and a set of needles. So I said, "Mom, can I borrow your the needles?" "Okay, here." So she'd give me the thing, and she'd give me one needle. I said, "Okay." I'd take the needle and just dig a little bit. And if you dig in the right way, it really doesn't hurt, too much. I'd get rid of that splinter, give her back the needle, and keep running until I get another splinter. So it's just like that. Is that we're in this body. The body is our prison in many ways. It's source. It's a result of our karma, of our fruit of activity, and it will be generating more prisons, bodies, if we just act materially. But it's also a gift of Krishna, how we can use it to get rid of the body. Only by acting in bhakti can we really get out of the material body and not get another one. Otherwise, whatever body we're in, we're going to be just coming up to species. So in that sense, the human body is very important and significant. But we shouldn't get hung up on it as a source of pleasure and trying to preserve it, which is impossible anyway. It's a tool like anything else, just like a car. A car is useful. Useful for Krishna service. We take care, to some degree, we maintain these cars. Because it's paraphernalia for Krishna service. So similarly, this is a car, and we should take care of it. Stay healthy, take prasadam. The Prabhupada said, not too much, not too little, and get enough sleep. And keep your health. Without your health, you can't do anything. But don't get hung up on it as a source of your security and pleasure, because it's not like that. That's a mistake. Okay, we have to stop. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. We'll resume on Monday. Thank you for your attention. With text 19. I'm going to make a marker here.